Hello, welcome to Scott's Odyssey. The B-25 Mitchell, a mid-range World War II bomber known for the Doolittle raid, first aircraft to sink a submarine, crashing into the side of the Empire State Building, and becoming a ghost story when it crashed in a river next to Pittsburgh, never to be found, even to this day. See you in a minute. Welcome back. If you've watched my videos before, thank you for your patronage, and if you're new to Scott's Odyssey, welcome aboard. The beauty of a North American aviation B-25N Mitchell, a mid-range bomber named after Brigadier General William "Billy" Mitchell, famous for doing things like being the first aircraft to sink a Japanese submarine in 1942 just off the coast of Washington State, a German U-boat off the coast of New Jersey, which divers finally found in 1991, and mysteriously that story got buried really quick and no further information's ever come out about it. The B-25 were most famous when Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle led the Special Aviation Project in Doolittle's raid and used them to bomb Tokyo, Japan in January of 1942, showing the Japanese that we did indeed have the ability to reach out and touch Japan's shores with ease. Then there are the sadder stories, like the one from 1945, where the B-25 that was flying from Bedford Army Airfield in Massachusetts to LaGuardia in New York, it ran into some thick fog, and during a flight path diversion over to Newark Metropolitan Airport in New Jersey, crashed into the north side of the Empire State Building, killing all 3 crew members and an additional 11 people within the building. Oddly enough, a piece of the aircraft cut into the elevator shaft of the building, severing the elevator car cable, causing it to drop 75 stories. Inside the elevator car at that time was 20-year-old Betty Lou Oliver. Fortunately, Betty survived the fall, stating, "I started yelling and pounding on the floor. I was going down so fast that I just had to hang onto the sides of the elevator to keep from floating." And to this day, Betty Lou Oliver is in the Guinness Book of World Records for surviving the longest fall in an elevator of over 1,000 feet. And in some act of miraculous engineering, the tower didn't collapse after the plane crashed into it, and it didn't burn, even though the Mitchell used a 130 octane gas versus something like, I don't know, normal jet fuel that's more like a diesel fuel and is only 15 octane. Making the Mitchell's gasoline a veritable bomb when it comes to combustibility. And still, the damage was minimal. As a matter of fact, the Empire State Building was immediately closed for repairs, and in less than 48 hours, pretty much all floors reopened for business except for one. And the demolished floor was purchased, refurbished, and opened for business by the United Distillers of America just 2 months later. Weird, don't you think? Anyway, that's not the end of interesting stories surrounding the B-25. And this one is my favorite because it happened in good old Pennsylvania, right next to the Steel City. And nobody's been able to finish the story in nearly 70 years. The base of the story is as follows. Major William Dotson, 5 crew members and possibly a passenger were flying from Nellis Air Force Base out of Nevada on January 31st, 1956. Now, it's unclear who the passenger was or if there really was even a passenger. In early recounts, there was a passenger, but that information became there was no passenger once the information was vetted by federal governments for restatement. You see, the original story came out, and then there were a lot of inconsequential changes that took place to the story as it was repeatedly amended over the next 2 weeks, complete with newspaper redactions to the point that the articles no longer exist, even on the newspaper archive sites. The destination of this flight was Harrisburg, with the alleged mission of picking up some aircraft parts. Yep, flying all the way from Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada to stop in with Harrisburg to get some aircraft parts. We'll touch more on that more in depth a little later. The flight was going well with a stopover in Oklahoma at Tinker Air Force Base and another in Michigan at the Selfridge Air Force Base for refueling. Sometime close to 4 p.m. as they approached Pennsylvania, Datsun reported to the greater Pittsburgh airport that their aircraft had lost a large amount of fuel and requested permission for an emergency landing. Then Datsun realized their fuel wouldn't last that long and requested permission to land at Allegheny County Airport. It is stated that at 4:11 p.m., with fuel completely empty and a report of engine malfunctions, Datsun was forced to make a fast decision on what to do. Datsun, a decorated World War II vet, took the B-25 and silently glided the aircraft over the Homestead High-Level Bridge, known today as the Homestead Grays Bridge, kept the wheels up, and belly flopped the Mitchell into the Monongahela River near the Glenwood Bridge in Hayes. Onlookers from the Glenwood Bridge saw the aircraft splash onto the top of the water, and as the aircraft slowly floated downstream, they watched as people climbed out onto the wings. The news reports all 6 crew members survived the crash. After 11 minutes of floating downstream, the crew members made the decision to swim to shore, most likely because the aircraft was taking on water. Unfortunately, 2 of the crew members, Captain Gene Ingraham and Staff Sergeant Walter Susi, did not survive the swim from the crash to the shore in the 34-degree waters of the river, and their bodies were not recovered until several months later. Within short time, the Forsythia, a Coast Guard cutter, began searching for the remains of the aircraft. As the story is told, the line slipped and the aircraft slid to its watery grave, never to be seen again. Search efforts for the wreckage continued for another 14 days, but the bomber was never recovered, nor was it ever found. Here we are, 67 years later, and the plane has still not been found, not even pieces of the wreckage. On to the fun parts. You know, the parts that don't line up correctly and all the conspiracies. First off, we need to get it out there that this aircraft with the serial number 44-29125 is not recorded as actually stopping in Oklahoma nor Michigan for a refuel at Tinker or Selfridge Air Force bases. And then things get a little more interesting when we start looking at the designations of this Mitchell. If you remember, I initially identified this aircraft to be TB-25N. That means T for trainer, B for bomber, 25 marking the type of aircraft, and N for special tests. Previous to 1956, the T would have meant transport, and the N would have been for night. Now, you might not find this important, but the N was by itself. It wasn't an NO for night observation, nor was it an NBL or NBS for night bombardment long and short distances. Just an N, which is not something you would normally see on an aircraft. Its destination was Harrisburg, coming out of Nellis, which is interesting because in 1956 there were not many places in Harrisburg that would make this a viable trip. In 1956 Harrisburg area, you had the Military Entrance Processing Station, or MEPS, over in Mechanicsburg. You had the Harrisburg Military Post, which was home to the PA National Guard, as well as the 28th Infantry Division, the oldest division in the armed forces. And you had the Olmsted Air Force Base, which was most likely their destination. You see, by this time the Olmsted Air Force Base was actually performing MATS, or Military Air Transport Service, and it was possible that they were going to be picking up supplies from the U.S. Supply Depot, but they were only for emergency relief supplies, not specifically aircraft parts. I only point this out because we're talking about the military. So if you wanted to swap out old parts for repaired old parts, you'd hit one of the AMARC sites, where they phase out parts or put parts into an extended storage. If they were looking for new parts, they'd have to contact one of the ALCs or F depots, the Air Force Air Logistics Centers, or maybe one of the S depots, which would be the DLAs, Defense Logistics Agency. But those are pretty much the only MICAPs, or Aircraft Mission Capable Parts Processing Centers, and the one for Pennsylvania is all the way up in Tobyhanna, in the Poconos. And besides that, they were not designated as a C, the designation for cargo or passengers, which means they should have not had any cargo on board in either direction of their flight. Which is interesting because if you're transporting cargo, you would have to have a C on your aircraft. And if you were transporting enlisted people, you would also have to have a C because, well, they're just military cargo. And now we're running out of reasons for why this aircraft was going to Harrisburg. But equally likely is that the N, meaning special test, was also a designation for some new weapon, some type of new mechanics, new avionics that would be found on this aircraft. But why fly it to Olmsted instead of one of the 40 strategic air bases or 20 secret air bases that existed along the way and up and down the coast, of which Pennsylvania never had any secret air bases and didn't even have a strategic air base until 1976 at ANGB Pittsburgh? That is, unless you had a passenger who was not considered enlisted, or if they fell under the category of high value, in which case we come to the other designation of N for special test. Now, why would you transport a high value person from Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada to Harrisburg Olmsted Air Force Base unless you were looking to do a quick transport of the high value person to some secret location, such as the newly opened underground Site R, which would be Raven Rock Mountain Complex? But that's all just speculation. I wonder why Dotson requested land at Allegheny County Airport after his initial request to Greater Pittsburgh Airport, now called Pittsburgh International. I mean, I understand he did not have enough fuel to make it, and that was the argument. But he was coming from Michigan in the Northwest and would have had to fly over Greater Pittsburgh to reach Allegheny County 20 more miles further southeast. Unless they weren't coming from the Northwest and they were coming from the Southeast and actually heading west or going somewhere else southwest, heading far northeast, which makes no sense because they would have flown over West Virginia and Maryland in order to reach Harrisburg. How is it they identified that not only were they out of fuel, but they had engine malfunction? I mean, which one was it? If they knew they had engine malfunction, they would have reported that rather immediately, even before they had fuel issues. And even if the malfunction is what was causing such a huge loss of fuel, they had plenty of time from Michigan to Pennsylvania to identify these types of issues. After the plane crashed into the water, which was spectacular flight skills on behalf of Dotson, why did the news report specifically identify that all 6 crew members survived the crash? Why was it so important to identify them as crew members, as opposed to just saying all 6 on board survived? Unless, possibly, they were just telling the truth, that the crew members survived, and any other non-crew members who were to be kept quiet didn't. How is it that months after the crash they were able to recover the bodies of the 2 drowned crew members, yet they still couldn't find the plane? The story stating the anchor line slipped and the aircraft slid to its watery grave, never to be seen again, is another interesting piece of information. You see, the aircraft itself, from bottom hull of the fuselage all the way up to its top, is 15 feet in height. The depth of the Monongahela at its deepest point, assuming we were at its deepest point, is only 20 feet. Yes, only 20 feet deep. Conspiracy theories have been put out there since the beginning regarding ideas of Area 51 being close to Nellis and a UFO being involved, but there were not UFO incidents reported in 1956, and Kecksburg wouldn't happen for another 9 years. And well, there's nothing in PA for the aircraft to have been coming here for or leaving here with. Some say it was carrying a nuke, but the only thing that carried around the nuclear babies are B-52 Stratoforces and later the B-36 Peacemaker. Even in transport, we didn't just plop a nuke onto something like a Mitchell, because nuclear weapons in transport were a really big deal when it came to security at the height of the Cold War. Crazy conspiracies claim that it was carrying showgirls from Vegas to entertain senators, but we all know that they were probably on Epstein Island. Some say that they had Soviet agents, which is a possibility, but the loss of said agents would have been noticed by Russia, and we were in the height of the Cold War, so I think an international incident would have been arrived at very quickly. More idiotic theories talk about the aluminum hull of the aircraft eroding away due to the toxic chemical combination of the Monongahela River. But the aircraft was a combination of mahogany, a steel frame, and aluminum skin, which means the frame and most of the furniture pieces inside would be in absolute pristine condition, even if the aluminum skin melted away. Another crazy theory is that it was pulled under the mud into the imaginary Fourth River of Pittsburgh from the Ice Age, known as the Wisconsin Glacial Flow or the Wisconsin River. This is highly unlikely because the Wisconsin River is actually an aquifer, and it's found far beneath a deep clay layer, and by far beneath, we're talking about 30 to 40 feet below the floor of the Monongahela, down through clay and rock to reach an aquifer densely packed with stone and nearly a mile wide. And the aircraft was not heavy enough to get into the clay, let alone pass through it and penetrate the stone. Since it went down, many attempts to find the aircraft with sonar have been performed, to no avail. But one conspiracy seems to hold, if you pardon the pun, water. A person came forward in 2016 who stated their brother was told by an older trucker from the J&L mill, along with other truckers, that they were asked to help haul the bomber out of the Monongahela and told it was a matter of national security. Other people have confirmed that they too were a part of this endeavor. They were told that what they were doing was for national security and to keep this a secret. Likewise, all of the steel factories in the immediate area were closed down and the employees sent home until the search process was complete. This is the most compelling of all the theories. But the idea that nobody's willing to say who they are or tell the actual story of what they did is kind of odd. Even the people who were told about the importance of national security for the Roswell and the Kecksburg incidents did not hold out longer than a few months or a year before telling their stories. And here we are, nearly 70 years later. In the end, we do not know what happened to the ill-fated B-25, what cargo it may have had, what mission it may have been performing. What we do know is that there was some secret and a massive cover-up that took place. Even after 67 years and Freedom of Information release request, all we've ended up with is an incomplete story and redacted testimonials. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts about what happened to the B-25 Ghost Bomber of Pittsburgh. Who knows? Maybe this video will be enough for someone to come forward. I hope you liked the story of the B-25 Ghost Bomber. If you learned something new, give the video a like, hit the subscribe, share the video out to other people. Those simple actions really do help the channel, and it takes little effort on your part. And if you wouldn't mind going out and picking up some merch or making a donation on PayPal or Patreon to help support a creator. As always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.